Okay, welcome back to what is this, the third episode of the Insiders? Third, fourth, second? I don't know. Time doesn't matter anymore. But we have been off for a couple weeks. Last week was July 4th, so figured we'd give everybody the week off. But little did we know that we were entering into the most dramatic, craziest, wildest, whatever adjective you want to use, week and a half that I think we've ever seen, at least in our lifetimes, in politics. We did an immediate debate, post-debate pod where we talked about that, but that was the last time we did this. So since then, the Democratic Party had a little bit of a meltdown, I think you could say, after the debate performance, and there was a real dramatic push orchestrated by some people at the very top to have a serious conversation about whether or not to keep Joe Biden at the top of the ticket. That conversation was had in a very public way, and it led up to a press conference that was just a couple of days ago. What was it, Friday? Thursday? When was the press conference?
It was Thursday, because we were thinking we were going to record on Thursday, and we said,
That's what
we
it
should
was.
wait.
Yeah. So we waited to have this. By the way, it's Sunday night. We're recording this, but yeah, we postponed the Thursday pod because we said the press conference is going to happen. It's going to change something. Something will happen, and we don't want to do a podcast right before it. Well, the press conference was fine, right? Most people thought the press conference was fine. I wrote a piece that basically said that was the worst case scenario for Biden because it didn't really move the needle one way or the other. And so we went into this unknown period, the weekend, which feels like 2 weeks ago already. And then last night, of course, the unthinkable happened. Someone tried to assassinate former President Trump. And that's where we are tonight, here to respond to the last 2 weeks, talk about how this affects the presidential race, lots of other things. Let's go ahead and just go off right off the top. Obviously, our thoughts and our prayers are with everybody involved in that, from President Trump all the way down, the victims who lost their life, those who are still recovering, the people who just had to see it, who are traumatized forever. We want to talk about how this affects the presidential race and politics and everything else, but obviously we can't gloss over the fact that somebody lost their life, and more were injured, and it's a moment in history that I don't think we're ever going to forget, and it will probably change politics forever. So let me just stop there and get immediate takeaways from what happened last night, and kind of what you're thinking moving forward, personally and also politically for the country. We'll start with Dr. Andrews.
Thanks, Tyler. Yeah, I mean, I don't even really know where to begin, but, to put this in context, I spend most of my waking hours working on the issue of gun violence prevention. Just 2-3 weeks ago, I don't even know, like you said, time doesn't matter anymore. The Surgeon General declared gun violence to be a public health crisis. I think everyone on this pod and everyone listening doesn't go into a large public gathering without looking where they can exit and wondering if today is the day they are going to be hunted by an AR-15. And we can now add political rallies to the list of all the places where Americans have been robbed of a sense of physical and psychological safety. And it's horrific. And as a mother of 3 children, I was with 2 of my children when you texted and shared this news with us. It's overwhelming to think that this is the world we have created for every person in this country. What I know, though, because I do this work every day, is that there are answers to this public health crisis. There are laws that the majority of Americans support, that if we had leaders with the moral courage to enact them, we could right this ship and get us back on the right path so that fewer Americans had to be directly impacted or indirectly impacted by gun violence. every single person who was at that rally, every single family member of a person who was at that rally, every single one of us who've watched it over and over again on the news are being re-traumatized. I worry about what that's doing to my own psychological health, but I also deeply worry about the corollary that our children experience, which, as you have heard me say, every single child who goes to school in this country learns how to hide from a bad man with a gun the same day they're learning the name of their first grade teacher. Like, this is all the same problem. And what is so dramatic about what happened yesterday is it was a former president who was hunted by an AR-15, but that doesn't change what the solutions are. And the solutions are known. It's red flag laws, it's expanded background checks, it's secure storage laws, it's a ban on assault weapons, a ban on high capacity magazines. And we just need real action at the federal level and at the state level so that fewer of us have to experience this horrific trauma.
Well said. And you know, it's interesting that the conversation immediately after the shooting went to political rhetoric, not guns. It was, you know, that conversation has not really begun yet. After most shootings in America, that conversation starts, it happens for a couple of days, and then people forget, and then we go through the cycle again. The conversation hasn't even begun this time about guns. Is that just because it was at a Trump rally and no one expects them to even entertain that? Or are we
I
just
think it's because we're
giving
all
up
just
on it?
waiting with bated breath to see if we're going to plunge into like the darkest days of America and political violence, or could this be the moment that we're all like, yeah, it's a little bit crazy that civilians have assault weapons on the street. And to me, it's like we're kind of just waiting for some sign of which direction this conversation is going to go.
Jermaine, you wrote a piece last night right after this happened, and I'm paraphrasing, but he basically said as a an African American state representative in a red state after last night, you feel like you've got a target on your back. Explain that. I think the term you used was a sitting duck, but explain why you wrote that.
Yeah, it's and I'm not the only one who feels that way. My phone was going off last night from other Black Democrat elected officials in this state who are now concerned with themselves. I got a text message from another former elected official who said that you know, they have read my piece and cried, thinking about their relatives who are elected officials, who are Black Democrat elected officials. It's almost like you know, we kind of feel like there's a target on us because it's like if you say the word Democrat right now, it's like you're part of the enemy. You're an enemy of this country. You're an enemy of America. Um, and I'm honestly nervous. I'm afraid. I don't. I mean, how are we supposed to attend any political events? I mean, we have back to school events coming up. We have, you know, rallies, and I mean, you know, just different GOTV events. I mean, things like that. And how are we supposed to attend these events without looking over our shoulders? You know, and it's a terrifying time for a lot of us. And this could have been a time that individuals could have used it to unify us all to say, hey, listen, you know, let's stop this mess. But we saw people in the Republican Party utilize this as an opportunity to actually incite more craziness and to say things like, oh, you know, Joe Biden called the hit, or you know, Democrats are the enemy,
Yeah.
or you know, they use this as an opportunity to incite more, which is why I wrote that piece to say, hey, no, I'm going to talk to the people on my side. You talk to the people on your side, and let's calm this stuff down, because we are headed towards a civil war. I mean, that's literally where we're at. We're at the point of a civil war, and I hope we can do something about it.
It's been a long time since I've gotten into a Facebook argument, a political argument on Facebook. I've just given up those fights. But I got into a little one this morning with somebody who tried to assert that Democrats had denied Trump's Secret Service protection. That's a myth that's going around the internet, and it's based off of after he was found guilty and became a felon. There was a bill that was introduced that would not allow Secret Service protection for convicted felons.
Mm-hmm.
And so this story that Democrats were trying to make him less safe
Right.
is not just perpetrating the internet. It has gone through. That is what they think. And so your piece last night where you said is retaliation imminent, essentially. Are you worried about that?
I am extremely worried about an individual trying to seek revenge, to prove their loyalty to their leader, to show that that the checks and balances are going to happen, or to show, because you do have Christian nationalists, that'll say an eye for an eye. So we've got to get back at somebody. You try to take my leader out, I'm going to take yours out, or I'm going to take somebody else out that has some sort of status. And it could be anybody. I mean, it could be anybody. And I am afraid. I am afraid at this time because, this is an opportunity where we're seriously just waiting for, honestly, we're waiting for Donald Trump to say something about guns. Because if Donald Trump says, hey, maybe we need to do something about guns, I guarantee this nation would then stop doing the crazy stuff with the guns. But if he doesn't say anything about guns, then I'm a sitting duck.
Yeah. Emily, you help run campaigns and help candidates, recruit candidates, train candidates. How in the world do you train a candidate to just stay alive? I mean, how does that conversation even go with a candidate after something like this?
Unfortunately, in some of the communities in our state, depending on the color of your skin or your gender, these are conversations we've already had with some of our candidates. Today, it becomes a harder conversation of how do we also keep members of your team and your volunteers safe when they're going to knock doors? Because now my fear is that somebody's going to go knock and inform somebody about their right to go vote, piss off the wrong person, scare the wrong person, right? This is a trigger happy society. Somebody knocks on my door and I'm not expecting it and I own a gun. Worst case scenario is going to happen. So it's not just about our candidates anymore. It's about every single volunteer, every single person who chooses to get themselves engaged in the democratic process. And this process does not work without people. So we cannot, the fear of this moment feels so heavy on my chest. But sitting out isn't an option, so we have to have these conversations. We've spent the weekend looking at candidate safety plans, at office safety plans, right? We have county party offices across our state where folks are sitting in there with signs on the door, identifying themselves as a Democratic office with proudly showing their candidate signs in the window, right? We are now having to have these sobering conversations. You're not going to be in the office by yourself. We're going to, if you haven't already installed a Ring doorbell, please install a Ring doorbell, right? These are conversations we shouldn't have to have. It's not just political violence, it's violence in general. Does not care what side of the aisle you are on. I think we saw that on full display yesterday. And unfortunately, I fear for the next 14 weeks heading into this election, waiting for that next shoe to drop, it feels like.
The other thing you talk about a lot, Emily, is people getting involved, not just running for office, but as a volunteer, activist, or an advocate. But what do you say to somebody who wants to get involved now, but they are worried about their safety in politics, or to somebody who says, politics is just too dangerous, I'm going to go join another organization? How do you keep people involved and engaged when this kind of stuff is going on?
It's a fair question, and I don't know that right now I have it in me to give the answer that maybe I would give a week from now or 2 weeks from now.
It's not an easy question, I know, but
it's not. And the answer I want to give is there's strength in numbers, right? The more people that are willing to step up, the more people that you're willing to surround yourself with, But then we saw a large group of people doing that exact thing yesterday, right? We saw people choosing to get involved in the political process, showing up in their community when a candidate was there, right? This isn't a candidate that I agree with on any issue, yet I still understand the importance and the value of having those community events. And so it's hard for me to say there's strength in numbers and that's what will keep us going and that's what will keep us safe. But that is going to continue to be what I hold on to.
Annie, you touched on it earlier about what you wish happened in the wake of this, but bringing it back to gun violence, the issue of gun violence as a political issue in the 2024 election, how does this impact that issue's, relevance, and the use of either campaign to make this an issue on the forefront, whether it's Trump running away from any kind of gun reform, say, look, I got shot, and if I could get shot and say they can still, have AR-15s, then, it's hard to defeat that argument. But how is this going to affect gun violence as an issue in 2024?
I think to what Jermaine said earlier, we're all just waiting because this could go one of two ways. He could tell all of his supporters to start packing when they come to his events and that everyone needs to go out and buy more guns and more ammunition. Or he could say, wow, that was horrific. Let's maybe find common ground. Now, I am very naive, but I'm not that naive. I don't actually think that's going to happen. I wish and I hope that it would happen. I want to go back to your question to Emily. As a recent former candidate, how do you convince people to get involved in this climate? And I have to tell you, I have had some serious internal thoughts about what am I doing in politics? Why don't I just go back to being a pediatrician? But for me, I know that if I do that 12 months from now, all the same damn issues that drove me to get engaged in politics to begin with are still going to be there, and I'm still going to want to be involved. So there's no right answer. There's no easy answer. I hope, and I hope so deeply that what happened changes the conversation, at least in the 2024 election, about America's gun crisis. But it is going to take some incredibly talented people within the Democratic Party to get this messaging right and to push back on the disinformation and the misinformation and to talk about how political violence has been applauded on the right and all of the ways in which the right has stood in the way of common sense gun legislation that we have been pushing for years and years and years. And I hope and I have faith in the Democratic Party to get this right, because this is a moment that could turn into a tipping point on this one specific domestic issue that is so important to so many voters.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about the impact all of this is going to have on the election, not just the attempt on President Trump's life, but let's just talk about the last 2 weeks, from the debate to the press conference to the whole push to swap out Biden. Jermaine, I'm interested because you and I have had conversations about the Democratic Party's slipping support among men, especially Black men, over the past several years. I'm curious. I've got an opinion, but I'm curious your opinion how this assassination attempt might affect male voters this year, and how Trump has been portrayed, how he looked, and how men saw it.
Yeah. Well, the first thing I think it's important to acknowledge the victim that we lost, Corey Comparatore. I think it's very important that we acknowledge his name and his family's name, and put my thoughts and prayers with his family so that they know their family will now go and join that club that nobody wants to join, where you are a victim of gun violence. I too, my family is a victim of gun violence. My brother was tragically murdered when he had just turned 17 by a friend of his. So I know what gun violence does to a family. And it's also hard for me to not empathize and sympathize with former President Donald Trump, because he is now also a victim of gun violence. And that is something that, we saw a disgusting article earlier today by Forbes. And Forbes was saying, is this, this shooting, is this going to help bring Donald Trump closer to black men? And it's a disgusting article to say that all black men are can be connected to Donald Trump based on a shooting. But on the other hand, you have people like 50 Cent who is doing concerts and his song Many Men, and he's got Donald Trump's head photoshopped on his body. And he's they're touting about how amazing Donald Trump is. You have the rapper Kodak Black who's out there talking about, we're going to defend Donald Trump. He is a he's an amazing man. He's a strong man. And it's hard not to say that yesterday what we saw when Donald Trump went to the ground and he came back up with his fist, that was probably one of the most American looking images that we have seen in a long time. It's if I'm Donald Trump's team, I'm going to take Joe Biden's voice where he says, when you get knocked down, you get back up. And I'm going to play it over that image right there over and over and over again, showing me getting back up with my fist in the air with an American flag in the background. And I'm going to show that. So he looked strong. He looked strong. He looked American. He looked everything that we talk about American is. He looked like everything that we've ever been taught that an American man is. And unfortunately, I think it's going to work in his favor that happened and that he was able to get back up. And he's still going on with his campaign plans as scheduled. I mean, that's even more strength that you can see.
Yeah, you can't unsee that picture, especially with the flag.
Yeah,
I mean, it's I in the wake of a terrible tragedy, I know his political team. That we're going to see that picture a lot
right.
over the next few months. Annie, how does this impact, or does it impact the pressure that's been building on President Biden to seriously consider stepping aside? We went into the weekend and it was like after the press conference, I think everybody said, okay, we're probably going to take a few more days. And it felt like it was dwindling, right? Does this ramp it back up or does it completely kill it?
I've been thinking about this a lot. And even before what happened at the rally yesterday, I was feeling this sense of like we are desperate for a real leader to step in this moment. And I think as Democrats, we felt that because we were just fighting with each other, waiting for some unifying image of Hakeem and Chuck and Nancy standing next to Joe with Barack there. Like we were waiting for this leadership moment so we all could just take a deep breath and say, okay, we're all together on this path forward. But after, and I was as skeptical as anyone after the debate, because what I saw on that stage was deeply concerning. I felt a lot better after the press conference because I felt like, okay, like he still has it. He can still be president. And now we have to help him with surrogates and a sophisticated operation. We have to help him successfully campaign for president. And now I feel like we find ourselves in a moment where we really need a leader like Joe Biden. And what I've seen from him so far, and we'll hear more from him tonight, is, this calm presence of experience. And just, it feels like exactly what we need. And so I do think from a political standpoint, this moment could turn into Democrats turning the page on the whole nominee swap conversation and us leaning into the strengths that Joe Biden brings to the ticket while we supplement that with all of the incredible depth of the Democratic Party as he continues to need to campaign for 14 more weeks so that he can get elected.
Emily, let me ask you one more question about the election and how candidates, and let's just say the presidential candidates, how this is going to affect how they communicate. I don't mean like on TV, but rhetoric. Is this going to change how Donald Trump talks about Joe Biden and how Joe Biden talks about Donald Trump?
God, I hope so. And maybe for like 5 whole minutes. I mean, I think with the Republican National Convention happening starting tomorrow, right? I think you're already seeing some of that come into play. They're inviting people like Nikki Haley, who were previously not going to be slated to come, inviting her in, trying to bring that unity message,
Yeah.
right? I think you're going to see that at least through the convention, hopefully, a week or two after. I would love to see it in perpetuity. I don't think that Donald Trump has it in him to not just take that swipe when it comes his way, right? He's not a teleprompter guy. He's just going to say how he feels. And the moment that this is almost like in his rearview mirror and he starts getting that bravado, like, I'm that guy. I took on the shooter and I won, and I'm the man that's chosen for America, and the concept that like God chose me, right? You're already seeing that play out in some of the narrative of some Republican elected officials, right? Like, God saved Donald Trump. Well, like, what about that poor gentleman who lost his life? Like, how come if God saved Donald Trump, he didn't save him? I'm not going to go down that road because I don't want to have an anxiety attack on this podcast. But all of that to say, I would love to hold on hope that that's going to be the case. And I trust that the Biden campaign and the DNC will do what it needs to do. I know that Jamie's having conversations with the RNC chairs. I know those conversations are happening. And Democrats are typically people who will give the benefit of the doubt as many times as they get slapped in the face. And so maybe the Democratic Party and the Biden campaign will be a little bit less incendiary for a longer amount of time than the former president and his team. I just don't see that being the reality of the political moment that we're in. And I just hope that people start to see that for what it is and the impact that it has.
Yeah. Well, the president's going to come on shortly and talk to the nation as only he can. And so we're going to wind down. The only thing I'll say about where the president is at this moment politically, I think we can all agree that the momentum has shifted dramatically over the past couple of weeks, and all the dynamics right now are bad for Democrats. Trump looks tough, Biden looks weak. Democrats are divided, Republicans are united. They're going into the convention. Nikki Haley's coming back to the family. He's going to get a hero's treatment this week. For at least a week, maybe longer. He's going to roll out his VP. That person will be more popular than him, whoever it is. We're not in purgatory. We're in hell. I mean, this is the worst possible position that Democrats can be in right now politically. And I wish I had the answer for how we move forward, but that's how we're going to end it. I want everybody to kind of give their 2 cents on how Biden and the Democrats move forward to win in November, despite these numerous setbacks that might be calcified in voters' minds. Emily, where do
I
you
wish
go
you
from
had
here?
it.
How do
I
you
wish you had it
win?
started with me because I don't know the answer to your question. I'm like this eternal optimist, maybe in a toxic way that just says like, can we unify in this moment? The divisiveness, the splitting between us about the debate and should Biden step aside? Like, I feel as if that's over now. I feel as if yesterday was this wake up call of like, we've read about this in history books and maybe none of us ever expected it to happen in our lifetime. And now it did, right? And it happened to our opponent, but that doesn't mean that we can take a deep breath. So if we come together and show that same unity that we know the Republicans are going to put forward, and we continue putting out that message of hope over fear, which Democrats love to do, can that be enough? And I don't know that it is, but that's what I hope to see moving forward.
Jermaine, what does Biden have to do?
And I was talking to somebody else about this earlier. The only way I can see this coming back on track is that President Biden is going to have to do something so dramatic, something so life-changing, something so life-altering for the American people that is just going to swing it back in our direction. Whether that has to do with marijuana, whether that has to be, executive action or something, it's going to have to be something so big, so monumental that every American is going to have to look at this and say, wow, wow, he did, wow, he showed his power, he showed his strength, he showed his courage. It's gonna have to be something so monumental that we have never seen before, and I'm afraid that that's just not gonna happen.
I'm sorry to make a baseball analogy with a basketball guy, but the problem with that is anytime you're swinging for the fences, you usually swing and miss. And you're right, like it might take something like that. And I yeah, it's a good point. All right, Annie, we'll close it out with you. Um, what 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 can he do to turn this around and still win in November?
I think generally this would be considered a political weakness, and I do think it's the biggest weakness of the Democratic Party, but we have clarity of purpose. We are all in this for like a very clear reason because we believe that America deserves better on every issue that is at stake. So we need to remember that why this game is so hard for us is because we have clarity of purpose. And secondly, we are on the right side of the issues. We are with the American people on abortion. We are with the American people on gun violence. We need to play to our strengths. We need to get Kamala out there talking about abortion every single day. And if we can message effectively on those two domestic issues, I do believe there is electoral hope for us in November.
Join us next week for therapy as we travel through this together. Yeah, well, I look, I agree with everything you are saying. This is going to be another big week. Republicans tend to overplay their hand sometimes, and I feel like this is one of those moments where you have to have some tact with how to handle these moments, and that is not exactly something they're very good at. But it is something we tend to do fairly well. And so we will be back in a few days with another episode, and hopefully things don't change too much. I don't think our mental health can handle that. But we will be back on Friday for the next episode of The Insiders. Thank you all for joining us, and we're going to go watch the president. See you.